Clark, the details of this report are pretty stunning. I mean, that multiple officers, police officers and employees with the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office were intimidated into giving your client special treatment and even falsifying his training records. Do you dispute that?
Yes. Yeah, the report speaks for itself, but this was after a few months that he'd been on the job. Keep in mind that reserve officers come in different varieties of experience. Some of them come directly from a police department that have had a number of years of experience and into retirement become a reserve officer. Some come from public life that have no police experience at all. Mr. Bates was a former police officer, but 30 years earlier, he was CLEAT certified and authorized to be a police officer in Oklahoma.
From 30 years ago.
Yeah, but lacked the training. So he was in a different category, and when he was received into the department, there was some level of concern and some jealousy, I think, and that was voiced to the superiors, and it was reviewed. I think the institution responded appropriately, did interviews, did an investigation, and took corrective action.
I feel like we haven't read the same report, because I've read now multiple police officers who gave testimony in this report here saying that they were pressured because of your client's friendship with the guy who ran the department, pressured repeatedly to initial documents that they hadn't even written, but made it seem as if they had written, saying he doesn't need to get the full hundreds of hours of training, basically pressuring the timeline of the training. You say it was kind of petty jealousies. These are seasoned police officers who have given testimony saying and are quoted in this report saying time and time again, we're talking about sergeants and corporals who are saying time and time again, your client didn't have the training.
That's just a flat-out misstatement of the report. I know the individuals involved, and I've spoken to them currently. And the one person that had the complaint...
Corporal Warren Crittenden was asked to initial documents that Bates didn't...
Anderson.
That Bates had gotten enough training, documents he didn't write.
Yeah, Corporal Crittenden was terminated a year later for improper conduct as a result of Mr. Bates's report. He's now standing for first-degree murder in another county, represented by the lawyers of this family. And what you just quoted is just a misinterpretation and a misquoting of that report. There weren't numerous seasoned officers saying that. There was one officer and one officer that said that he felt that Mr. Bates was getting special treatment.
Did your client give a watch to senior officers, to his buddies, in addition to fishing trips?
No.
Okay. In one section of the report, it alleges that in 2009, your client was actually pulling over vehicles on the road when he wasn't trained or authorized to do so. When a sergeant approached him about it, he responded, according to this report, quote, "Well, I can do it, and if you don't like it, you can talk to Chief Deputy Tim Albin or Sheriff Glantz, because I'm going to do it." Does your client admit saying that?
No.
Was he, in fact, pulling over vehicles on his own?
No, nor did the investigation conclude that.
That
was a rumored report from one person to another that wrote it down. If you talk to those individuals, that was a misunderstanding. That didn't happen.
Well,
and that was remedied.
According to this report, that incident resulted in then Chief Deputy Tim Albin chastising the sergeant and saying, quote, "You need to stop messing with him," meaning your client Bates, because he does a lot of good for the county. Did that happen?
Anderson, he was on the job a few months at this time. 6 years has elapsed from that point forward. So when he came on the department, obviously there were people that had issues, that raised issues. They were addressed. He was trained, and that's what happened.
You're saying as if all this was 6 years ago. The only reason we're having this conversation is because your client shot a guy at point-blank range believing that it was his taser. So that's why we're having this conversation. I mean, to imply that there were problems 6 years ago, he's got a bigger problem right now.
Well, honestly, you can review the training records and you can level adequate criticism in that regard, and I agree with you. More training is better, but sometimes you can't train for a circumstance that happens in the field.
Your client is out on bail. He was approved to take a month-long vacation in the Bahamas. The Harris family released a statement about that decision, and it reads in part, "Mr. Bates is vacationing in the Bahamas at this time sends a message of apathy with respect to the shooting in Eric's life." They went on to say, "At a time when we are still mourning the death of a loved one that he shot down in the street, Mr. Bates will be relaxing and enjoying his wealth and privilege." I wonder what your reaction to that statement is.
Well, Mr. Bates's travel plans involve his grandchildren, his daughters. They made plans back in September to go on this trip. And he was really torn, honestly, about whether he should go. But he felt that he's not going to make a difference in what happened to Mr. Harris, and he feels terrible about it, but he can still meet the commitments to his family and to his loved ones, and he didn't want to let his grandchildren down. I respect that. It's not an insult to Mr. Harris that Mr. Bates is a family man and wants to stay connected with his family and meet his obligations.
You really don't think that if a man shot a loved one of yours and then went on vacation to the Bahamas, that you wouldn't feel that that's an insult? I mean,
if they're disconnected, they're not related. What do you want him to sleep on a bed of nails? I mean,
no,
they're
but
not
sleeping
connected.
in a nice home might be bad, and maybe think about what he's done, or I don't know. I'm just saying they clearly are upset. You're saying you wouldn't be. That's the answer to the question, I guess.
He was devastated. All right, he was absolutely rocked and devastated. He was not only, for the immediate statements, what can I do for Mr. Harris and his family? That's been his absolute core center intent.
Well, Mr. Brewster, I do appreciate your time, and thank you very much.